of a traffic offense, of speeding. Good examples are summary harassment, where you're bothering another person repeatedly.
I have a question. Is it like if you're, would it count as an offense if it's like you have to be this tall to ride something, but you ride it anyway, or something?
A car?
No, like a water slide or an amusement park ride or something.
Oh, yeah, that could be theft of services. If you didn't pay, but you went in the amusement park anyway.
No, I mean like if you had you had a kid and the kid wandered off, and there was must be this tall ride and he wasn't that tall.
Oh no, that's not. That wouldn't be considered a criminal offense. But the amusement park could prevent you from letting your kid on there, but I don't think you can be charged criminally.
But if the kid gets hurt, couldn't they like sue the amusement park?
They could, and there's a huge difference between civil law, which is when somebody just gets hurt as a result of negligence or failure to follow rules, and criminal law, which largely deals with intentional acts and violations of criminal law. Yeah.
What if the people in the amusement park, like the people that were supposed to be supervising the water slide and roller coaster, if they just let the child on and the child got somehow hurt, would that be against the amusement park?
Yeah, but I think that would be more in the civil arena, which has to do a lot of times with money damages and compensation, as opposed to penalizing somebody by having them be convicted of a crime. So they would face consequences, but we wouldn't charge them criminally. That's a whole different arena. Why don't we move on to the next question?
Ezekiel. Hi, my name is Isabella, and my question is, can you discuss the case with Drew Bowden and Holly is dead?
I can talk about it a little bit. The charges are still pending, so we don't know what the outcome is going to be, but that is an example where a person, even though he was committing a driving offense, Drew Bowden, the allegation is he was driving so fast and so recklessly that he had the equivalency of malice when he committed that act. And that's why he wasn't just charged with manslaughter, he was charged with murder. And he's facing a third-degree murder charge, which is pretty extraordinary for a vehicular homicide case. Usually they are charged in their own subsection, but because our allegation is his behavior was so egregious and so reckless that it was the equivalent of malice or evil intention. So if he's convicted of that third-degree murder charge and he's still awaiting his trial date, he could receive up to 20 to 40 years in jail. I'm not saying that he will, that's still to be determined, but that is a possibility. So in any way you slice it, those types of cases, it's a terrible tragedy. Unfortunately, there's not a lot that we can do to fix the circumstance. When we get involved in the cases, it's often reactionary. The best that we can do is make the criminal or the offender pay for what they've done, but we usually can't fix what has already occurred, sad to say. What's the next question, please?
Hi, my name is Jenna. How do you process evidence that may be found in a scene?
Very carefully. When we're called to a scene, and usually it's not the DAs that are called to the scene, but our detectives or our police officers go to the scene. In the larger departments or the more serious cases, like homicide cases, we will have specialists go to the scene. And one detective usually will be responsible for processing the scene or directing who collects which type of evidence. But there are certain different things that occur just about all the time at a scene. If you take a murder scene, for example, once the police get called there, the first responders, the first cop on the scene, his first obligation is to clear the scene, to make sure that there's no danger there, to make sure that the bad guys aren't there anymore. Once he does that, his next obligation is to attend to the victim. Because oftentimes, especially in a murder case, the victim is still there. And if the officer can help the victim, resuscitate the victim, and sometimes that's possible, that's their next obligation. Once that's taken care of, the officer has to call in reinforcements, and we do what's called sealing off the scene. You ever see that yellow police tape? You see it on TV a lot? Well, we really do use that. And sometimes we not only will seal off a room, we'll seal off a whole house or an apartment building or a whole neighborhood. There was a case pretty close by to here where an entire neighborhood got sealed off because there was a gun battle going on. And sometimes that's what needs to be done. Sometimes the evidence can be collected physically, and the police officers will put gloves on. They always will photograph and videotape the evidence before they collect it. And other times, yes,
Don't you take, like, if it was committed by a gun, don't you take the casings?
absolutely, wherever we can find them. And where we can find them, we'll take the slugs. For example, in the case I was talking about, a gun battle, we located some of those slugs inside of police car doors and inside of trees. And wherever we can locate the casings and the slugs, we want to put those together and match them forensically. But once we do the photos and videos of the scene, we start physically collecting evidence. And then we also do what's called a forensic collection of evidence, where we may do swabbings of a person for their DNA to see if we can match up that person's DNA with evidence that we might find. Or we may do a forensic analysis of a person's computer. How many people here have cell phones? Gosh.
My brother does. Does that
I'm behind
count?
the time. I have a 12-year-old. She doesn't have a cell phone yet, so I'm on record here. This is good.
She better not see this video.
You all know that your cell phones, if they're pretty new, they have GPS capability in them.
Yeah.
So not only can you find out where you are and where you need to be on your cell phone, we can find out where you've been and where you're going on your cell phone. Now, before you get too upset, we need a court order to be able to do that. But we also can do what we call cell phone tower dumps and cell phone record dumps, where we can tell who you've talked to, who you've texted, what locations you've traveled with your cell phone. So that's part of that forensic evidence collection. Yeah.
Is the cell phone thing kind of like a search warrant?
Great question. Yes, we would need either a search warrant or a court order to get that information from that cell phone. And there are actually three types of information. We would want the contents of the cell phone itself. If you've got pictures in your cell phone, or you have old text stored in your cell phone, we want what's in that cell phone itself. We want your call detail records, which is the evidence of all the people that you've called and texted. And we want your cell tower information, because that shows your locations, your GPS locations of where you travel. So cell phones have really become a wonderful, wonderful tool for us to exploit when we're trying to catch the bad guys. Be mindful of that. All right, who has the next question?
I have
Ryan?
Yes.
Actually, it's not like a question on paper. It's a question like, what if with your cell phone GPS it shows everywhere you've been? What if you just happen to at one point walk somewhere where the day after a murder was committed? What if that happened?
Well, would we suspect you of the murder? Do we have a reason to believe you committed the murder?
And if you did?
Well, if you did, you're in trouble. But if you didn't commit the murder, the mere fact that you were somewhere, cell phones, everybody has them, everybody uses them. So you can use your cell phones and not worry about being falsely accused of something. We usually need more evidence than that. So please don't worry about it. Keep using your cell phone if your parents say it's okay.
Ryan?
My name's Ryan, and are people more frequently found innocent rather than guilty?
Well, this is going to really shock you. The majority of people, and I'm talking about 98% of all people that are accused of crimes, don't even reach the trial stage. The majority of them take responsibility, and they either plead guilty, or they're found guilty, or they're given a second chance in what we call a diversionary program. So of the 2% that are left that actually contest their charges, that actually take their charges either to a judge to decide or to a jury to decide, even the majority of those people are found guilty. Because when you're a DA or an assistant DA, you have so much discretion. And we realize that when we charge somebody with a crime and we force them to go to trial, we're forcing them to defend themselves for their livelihood, their lives, and their reputation. And we don't take that very lightly. So when we charge somebody and we make them defend themselves in trial, we want to make sure that we're pretty well convinced that they're guilty first. And usually if we're convinced, then we can convince a judge or a jury, and that's part of our job. Our job isn't just to seek convictions, it's to seek justice. And sometimes that means letting somebody go if we aren't sure that they've committed the crime or we don't have sufficient evidence to prove that they've committed the crime. Who's got the next question?
Matt McDonald?
My name is Matt, and my question is, have you ever called for a death penalty?
I have. I have worked on a few cases where I've asked a jury to come back in order to understand the process a little bit. You're only eligible for a death penalty in Pennsylvania if you commit and are found guilty of a first-degree murder. That's the most serious murder that there is in Pennsylvania, and that's when you killed somebody with malice and you have the specific intent to kill. So I've actually gone to a jury 3 or 4 times and asked for them, after they found a person guilty, then asked them to sentence a person to death. And in one case, a jury did sentence a person to death in a case that I had.
Is he dead as of today?
No, he's alive, and in fact, as is the case with most death penalty verdicts in Pennsylvania, his death penalty got overturned, and he's now serving a sentence in prison. But nevertheless, the jury did find and sentenced him to death. Yeah.
Would mass murder be considered for the death penalty?
It would. In fact, that's a good question. There are a number of factors that are considered, and I won't get into all of them today, but a number of factors that the DA's office has to consider before deciding to even ask for the death penalty. And one of those is if you kill more than one person. So that would be an instance where we probably would ask for it. But to give you an example, oftentimes what we'll do is because of the expense and the effort that it takes to actually carry out that sentence, which rarely is carried out here in Pennsylvania, we will accept a guilty plea to first-degree murder and recommend a life sentence as opposed to seeking the death penalty. Because in Pennsylvania, if we get a life sentence, that means that the person who is convicted of first-degree murder has to stay in jail for the rest of their lives. That's about all you can ask for, and that usually satisfies the victims, satisfies the system. And like I said, even in a life sentence, you can't bring those victims back. I just had a case 2 weeks ago where we were seeking the death penalty against a man who killed his girlfriend's little 18-month-old daughter. And he decided to plead guilty to avoid the potential of receiving the death penalty. And he pled guilty to first-degree murder, and he's now serving the rest of his life in prison. Yes?
If I've been in prison, pretty much you die either way.
You die the long way. But there is a huge difference. Even though I think it's since the 70s, since the death penalty was reinstated here in Pennsylvania, we've only had 3 people who are sentenced to death in Pennsylvania who have been actually executed by the state. And those 3 people are what we call volunteers. They were 3 people who received the death sentence from